702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the most important thoughts, comments, interviews, insights, and sometimes just the best jokes of the week. If you'd like to hear more, please go to our website or go to your podcast app and search for The Money Show. As always, there might be someone in your life who you think might benefit from hearing something. Maybe just send it along to the News WhatsApp to do it or whatever might be a good idea. To start, some of the news stories that we thought were important this week. Research by the Public Investment Corporation and Oxford University suggesting we could create 250,000 jobs and add 100 billion rand in economic output in just 5 years if we were to focus on reindustrialization. It's a fascinating conversation. SARS confirming their revenue collection actually beating their estimates by 18 billion rand. The estimate for the period was 907 billion. They eventually collected 925 billion rand, and that, of course, does lead to bigger conversations about SARS, what it needs to get more money, and also the size of the illicit economy. And Nvidia becomes the first publicly traded company to reach a market cap of over $5 trillion. Tonight, we bring you a mixture of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. We start with our conversation with the investigative journalist and author Pauli van Wyk. She co-wrote a new book. It's called Malema, Money, Power, Patronage. It's unflinching in its examination of the rise of the economic freedom fighters leader Julius Malema, his business interests, where money comes from, and how it all works. She talks particularly about a network of allies, including Karis Nafte, who also had a big week for various reasons.
So Malema is having trouble to initiate his own businesses without unlawful money. So all of it mostly comes from tenders. And when you talk about On Point, which was a company in Limpopo in 2010, then we're talking specifically about Limpopo government money. So it really, and all the scandals that we elaborate on in the book, explains how he and the EFF has fleeced the metros, who is fleeced in the early days the Limpopo government, how VBS Mutual Bank has been a part of his honeypot, and how he is not stopping.
Wasn't the Premier of Limpopo at the time Karis Nafte? Isn't he now the Deputy Minister of Police?
Yes, I'm happy that you say that, because it's one of the points that we need to make. Apart from you saying that it's not a story about Malema, but about his money, it's also not a story only about Malema. It's a story about South Africa, where, as you just rightly said, Karis Nafte is now in a very powerful position where he was part of and very much a suspect in the On Point Limpopo tender scandal. The Hawks never investigated that strand of the investigation successfully. The NPA never pushed it through the courts, and now he's the Deputy Minister of Police, holding a lot of power.
Why did the NPA never investigate On Point? I mean, I remember, my memory has a day where the trial was supposed to start. Malema's co-accused was ill, so the trial didn't start on that day. His co-accused is still with us, and I understand healthy, and the trial never restarted.
Yeah, exactly. So the NPA had a investigation from the Hawks, which they took to the courts. One of the investigations fell through and landed in court, and the people were found not guilty. It's one of some of Malema's funders, and the court, especially in that case, I think it's important to note, said that the puzzle pieces appears as if there's definitely something wrong, but the Hawks could not prove their case. And that was sort of what happened in the next case as well. It was poorly, now we can say it was poorly investigated. All the puzzle pieces were not there. And the NPA at the time, then when the judge threw out the case, the NPA just never reinstated 51 charges against Malema of money laundering, fraud, corruption, and racketeering.
Okay, so Malema, we remember, as leader of the ANC Youth League, then formed the EFF. And yet, as a political party, the high water point of it got the high water mark, was that it was the third biggest party in the country. And yet, as you say, there's a patronage network around him. How does that work? I mean, for example, a contractor in, I don't know, Joburg or maybe another metro. How does it end up from what you say, that money ends up with Malema?
So there's many different ways, but the usual pattern would be something like a tender gets advertised. There's some sort of political influence that redirects tenders towards friends or family of Malema. Money would flow through a certain number of companies until the company that's linked to Malema gets paid by either a department or a related company. And then there's a few examples of what may happen. Either Malema receives boxes and envelopes full of cash. Sometimes his properties are paid for, his fleet of cars are paid for, or money flows to bank accounts linked to him. So either his own slush funds or way back in the day when he wasn't as smart, it was Patronage Family Trust, a bank account directly linked to him.
And this would be in return for a tender. So even though he hasn't been in the biggest party in the country for a long time, he still was influencing tenders then.
Yes, absolutely. So we see that from the very start in the Limpopo days, where Malema always had outsized influence in the political sphere in that he operates. So and that's why I think it's important again to take us back to Castle Matale's influence, where Castle Matale and people around Matale and Julius Malema were so powerful and that they could redirect and realign tenders moving to fraudulently. And this we can say because the public protector, Thuli Madonsela at the time, found that the on-point tender was fraudulently given to the company. So often fraudulent tenders were given to these companies, and there were some instances where it came to light that his cousins, for example, received big tenders, where or at other stages where he phoned some of the treasurers or the politicians, the people who pushed the pay button in the department, and sort of vociferously located for the young people who needed to be paid. And some of those young people would always turn out to be either his cousins or his friends.
Where is SARS in all of this? I mean, we've seen them turn against Lucky Montana recently, or take action against him. Clearly, they will be tracking this income?
Yes, so SARS did look at his income and found it an astounding almost 30 million rand flowing to Malema between 2005 and 2012. So that triggered a rather large investigation termed Project Caesar into Malema, his cohort at the time. And that's where Malema's first problems with SARS started, because there was a lot of money going to Patronage Family Trust and to himself, and to his properties and his fleet of cars. So recently, there's, of course, the VBS matter, there's the matter of the metros, and we know that Malema lives far beyond his means. What's happening at the moment with SARS is not quite clear. We understand from sources that SARS investigators are looking at Malema and, of course, Floyd Shivambu. But Malema, it's important to understand, has grown smarter. So it's smarter and wealthier and more influential. So there's always people who are willing to either assist him with paying some of his SARS fees, or people who would help him hide the money more efficiently, or he just became much more smart in terms of the lawyering around it. So at the moment, what's happening with him and SARS is not in the public arena.
Pauli, you've written an entire book making a series of very serious claims against an important politician in South Africa, a politician who has a constituency. I'm presuming you offered him the right of reply in all of this? I mean, it's serious claims that you make.
Yes, it is. So there's many instances where we quote him himself, especially in the On Point case. We had the privilege of having his court documents where he where he described his own narrative and his own defense. So in the VBS matter, the same thing. In different cases, we went to him for his opinion. The same way there was a Mazotti mine in Limpopo where Malema and Mazotti apparently had a talk to, and Malema recalled some of the EFF people who were protesting at the mine. And the same thing with the metros, where where the EFF and Malema seized some of the metros. So in all of those instances, we did ask him for his comment. We did not tell him that it would be collated later into a book. So based on legal advice, we didn't mention that it's a book that's to be written.
Okay, so you quote his side of the story, essentially.
Yeah, quite extensively, actually.
Pauli van Wyk unpacking the intricate ties between money and power.
702. You are listening to The Money Show's best bits.
On Business Unusual this week, Graham Codrington, the lead researcher at Tomorrow Today Futures Institute, he's been talking about the hidden cost of AI and how expensive it is to actually make AI work. This is all about electricity. Tools like ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, and Grok. Around 500 million people are using them every week, but the amount of electricity they're using is just astonishing. Graham Codrington had some very important thoughts on that.
It is definitely worse. I don't think people really understand this. You go on your phone and you put in a ChatGPT request and it comes back with a wonderful answer or generates a picture for you. But actually what's happening in the background is somewhere in a cloud server, and the clouds are not in the clouds. They are sitting on land somewhere. A massive big computing GPU, a graphic processing unit, fires up. And if you've ever had your own computer or laptop whirring away and fans whirring while you may be doing a video or some, heavy processing, you'll realize it generates heat and it uses up electricity. And these generative AI queries are way worse than anything else that we've done before. Just for reference, if you do just a simple query to ChatGPT or any one of the others, it's basically, if you get a sort of medium-sized response, let's call it that, it's the same as having charged your cell phone from 0 to 100%. So think about how long that takes or how much power that takes. And these videos that are now being produced, every 5 seconds of videos is the same as switching your microwave on at full power for an hour. This is going to add up if we've got 500 million users using these things every single day at least once. This adds up. People are estimating somewhere between 1% and 2% of total electricity use on the planet at the moment goes into these generative AI models. It's quite something.
Sure. I'm presuming that, national grids and even sort of international grids like ours are not going to be able to run that. AI companies who want to build their own, it might be cheaper for them too. But that takes a long time, and we all know exactly how long it takes to build a power station.
Well, you see, now this is where I wanted to come in this evening. If people didn't know about the power usage, there is a bit of a wow there. But I think many people knew it was using a lot of power. But now this is exactly the right question, Stephen. Where does that power come from? And Sam Altman has recently, so he's the guy behind OpenAI, which is ChatGPT. He's basically said, no, they're going to build this massive 50 gigawatt data center, and they're going to just build a nuclear power station right next to it because that's just going to be the easiest way to deal with it. Now, if any South African was listening, they might have a little spidey sense going up. How long does it take between discussing whether you are going to build a nuclear power station and when you actually build one? And then we've got to even ask who can build it. Because it's a very specialized skill, and a power station like that costs, in excess of $25 billion to put together. So that's the second part of the problem. The first part is that costing us more than we thought in terms of electricity. The second is we don't have enough electricity, and we can't just wave a magic wand to make this electricity appear, as much as these tech bros would hope that they could just say, make it so, and then it's done by next Friday. It's not going to happen with this one.
At the moment, most of these things are free to use. Isn't that the way? I mean, isn't that going to just come to an end because it's just too expensive?
Well, and I think it's worse than that, even Stephen. This is my third data point, if you like. So there's a lot of electricity to use. We don't have enough electricity. But the third data point is the promises of continual growth. I'm sure I heard this on your show recently, but just to remind people, the so-called big seven tech companies, that's Apple, Microsoft, and let me get this right, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Nvidia, and Tesla. There we go. They account for 37% of the S&P 500 index. 37% of the big 500 companies, that's the market cap. And listen to this one, Stephen. 92% of GDP growth in the United States this year comes from those seven companies alone. In other words, our economy, the perception of growth in our economy and the perception of how healthy our economy is in the hands of seven companies. But here's the problem. These seven companies are all buying from each other. So Nvidia gives a loan to Microsoft and OpenAI in order to buy Nvidia's own chips. But then Microsoft gives a loan to Nvidia in the form of cloud hours to use the hours that they are building. And I think all of this adds up you've got to be careful of using this word on the Money Show, but I want to use the word bubble at the moment because the money's going around, the capital investment is going around in circles between these seven and two or three others, including Oracle and OpenAI. But they've got to start getting user money in. And I pay for one or two of the professional versions of these platforms, but that's only $20 a month. And in electricity usage alone, I've calculated with how much I use of these things, I'm using at least 3 times that cost in the electricity alone, let alone the capital investment. In other words, the paying users are not paying enough. And most of the users are non-paying. Again, don't want to use a word, but I'm starting to use a capital B for the word bubble here. And that, for me, is it's not so much business unusual as maybe even business dangerous at the moment, as we think about how much AI is integrated into what many companies are doing around the world.
We got 20 seconds, Graham, but I mean, there would be money to be made in supplying the power.
Well, in the old gold rush days, they said, it's not the people who are digging for the gold that are going to get rich. It's the people who are selling the shovels. And I think that's probably where we are now, that the people who supply the power and the infrastructure are going to be the ultimate winners. We could be the losers if we rely on these models without understanding the implications of the cost structures in the background.
Graham Codrington there, the lead researcher at the Tomorrow Today's Futures Institute.
702. The best of the Money Show from this week.
On How I Make My Money this week, we had a special guest who focuses on dogs. She's worked for her entire career in training, in animal training, particularly in dogs, doesn't mind cats. She's also become the first person to help you mediate any disputes around pet custody. Karis Nafte is her name. She has a fascinating story.
The story when I grew up was that my first word was dog before I even said mom. That might be the family myth, but it's certainly stuck around. And so I have my whole life been obsessed with animals. And interestingly for me, what fueled this was that I wasn't allowed a dog when I was a child. And partly this was because my parents, they didn't actually really want a dog themselves. And to their credit, because I think this is a mistake a lot of parents make, they didn't just give me a dog because they figured they'd end up taking care of it. So by not getting a dog the moment I wanted one, it fueled this desire to learn everything I could about dogs and start a dog walking business when I was 10 years old and keep this obsession going until I did get a dog when I was a teenager. And I have been working with them ever since.
And it's just dogs for you, hey? You're not a big fan of cats?
No, that is not true. Actually, I have 3 cats right now and 3 dogs. I love all animals. I have worked in my career with horses, cats, wild animals, worked on movie sets with all kinds of things. So my primary love, it's fair to say my primary love is dogs, but equally, I think cats are absolutely fabulous. So I love them also, and parrots.
Okay. So you're talking to someone who has 2 dogs and 3 cats, but that's because I have a teenage daughter and all the rest. But you really can't train a cat, surely now.
You can train a cat, Stephen. You just have to be very patient. You have to convince the cat it's their idea, and then you can train a cat. Any living animal can learn, right? Training is essentially learning that you are managing in a clever way. So you definitely can train cats. However, dogs are uniquely sort of bred to want to follow instructions. You know, we as we human beings were creating this species to live with us, we selectively bred the animals that kind of got a kick out of working for us. So, you know, people, when I help them with like their border collie, for example, they'll say like, I think my dog has obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'll say, no, they don't. Or maybe they do, but that's how they're supposed to be, because they have been bred to want to repeat an action over and over involving a person. So that's what makes dogs so easy. And you just have to be very smart with cats. It takes a special skill.
I have a dog that likes to do the same thing over and over, and it doesn't involve people so much as it involves a ball.
Yes.
When you finished school, and obviously you wanted to get into the animal economy, were there a lot of options? I mean, most people, if they think of getting into the animal economy, think, well, I have to be a vet. But when you were finishing school, perhaps the pet economy, if I can call it that, was beginning to really take off.
It was. I was in a very interesting position because I began working with dogs in the mid-90s. So I've been at this for almost about 30 years now. So I left, as soon as I left school, I started working full-time at a dog training school. I knew that I wanted to work with dogs. And from that, I was in a really fantastic, lucky position. One of those happy accidents where I met someone who knew someone. And I ended up working with some incredibly talented experts in the field of how do you train dogs? How do you change dogs' behavior in a way that it can work better for the people around them? How do you teach dogs, tricks? So you, like I said, you can work with them on movie sets. And what was interesting for my particular story was that I was part of the team. I worked for the people who opened up the very first doggy daycare in the state of Oregon. So at the time, there were no other doggy daycares. And some of the trainers I worked with had this idea. And, people told us we were crazy. Like no one would ever send their dog to a daycare. That's the stupidest idea we've ever heard. So we'll get to that in my current job also. That's kind of been the story of my life. But we knew it would work. We knew there was a need for it. We opened it up. And of course, our doors were, our business was full in about a month after we'd opened. So I have always been quite lucky in seeing what's needed around animals and people and being willing to put myself out there, even in new and uncomfortable places. Even for me, moving from America to Cape Town was new and uncomfortable, but there was a real need for people who were working in the dog behavior space to help people, because wherever there's dogs and people, there's problems. So yes, I make my money with animals, but the truth is it's the people who call me. It's the people who follow my instructions or don't. So my work really, honestly, Stephen, I'll tell you a secret that everybody can hear. The dogs are the easy part of my work. Okay. The hard part of my work, whether it's as a mediator or as a dog behaviorist, is the people in the picture, because we human beings are a lot more stubborn than dogs, I must tell you.
So, I mean, I think there's a famous story, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called What the Dog Trainers Saw. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell, actually, who basically talks about how the humans react, and it's the humans that make the dogs fight because the humans don't like each other. The humans get tense. And I was going to ask you, just like teachers always tell me that their customers aren't the children, it's the parents, clearly for you it's the same thing. It's the humans that you've generally got to manage.
Absolutely. Dogs are just being dogs. So when dogs chase other dogs, or they bark, or they, pee in the wrong place, or chase a squirrel, none of these are wrong. But in the wrong circumstance, none of those behaviors are wrong, but in the wrong circumstance or in the wrong place or at the wrong time can be very troublesome for people. My work is to help people understand, first of all, why is the dog doing what it's doing, so they have a little bit of understanding about it. And then it's too simplistic to say it's the owner's fault. But the circumstances in which the animal finds itself has led to that situation happening. So I mean, for example, I learned the hard way many years ago when I am interviewing a client who's having let's say their dog is a little bit aggressive or anything you could think of. And I have to go through a very detailed interview process. And I used to ask people, do you walk your dog? And everyone said, oh, yes, of course we walk the dog. And then I realized I had to get a little more specific to say, how often do you walk your dog? Because very often people would say things like, well, we walk our dog every single Sunday, without fail. The dog just gets one walk a week. And situations like that of not exercising a dog enough will lead to a dog. It's kind of like having a petrol tank with petrol in it, and you light a match to that, and they're going to explode, not because they're bad, but because they haven't had the proper outlets for their energy. So you could blame the owners, but that's just not helpful and won't do anything. But we have to understand that the lack of exercise in this example will lead to potentially aggression or a dog becoming unmanageable.
Have you ever been dealing with a dog or met a dog and actually worried that this was going to be quite a dangerous encounter? Some dogs, I know some people are very scared of dogs, and I understand that, especially if you're not used to them, or especially if the only dogs you've met have been quite difficult or quite fierce. But have you ever met a dog where you've actually thought, this is quite a dangerous animal? And you will know the horrific stories we've heard about some of the breeds of dog that have a terrible track record, particularly when it comes to attacking children.
No one's ever asked me that question, Stephen. That is such a great question. And the answer is absolutely, I've been scared of dogs. Oh my gosh. I mean, I think anyone in my position who has not met a dog they're scared of is naive or not doing their job very well. So I've been in situations where I've driven to people's houses and was unable to get out of the car, but had to sort of do the session by rolling my car window down and talking to the owners that way. Wow. So absolutely, I have encountered dogs that I have been very scared of, and rightly so. The power breeds and not necessarily some of the big power breeds. Any strong dog, any physically strong dog can be a dangerous dog. And what you have to understand when working with any dog, doesn't matter if it's a Chihuahua or a Doberman or anything in between, any dog can bite you in the right circumstance or the wrong circumstance. If they're scared, if they feel threatened, if they feel threatened in their safety, any dog has the potential for biting. But many dogs can display aggressive behavior if it's worked for them in the past. In other words, let's say they're not very comfortable with people, and that dog learned through trial and error to snap and growl that will keep a person away. And then that behavior becomes established for that dog because it works for them. So yes, I've definitely been unfortunately been bitten more times than I care to think about. But every time I've been bitten, it's been my fault. I haven't been paying attention. I mostly haven't been paying close enough attention to a situation. And every time I've learned from it. And I've never, ever blamed a dog.
There'll be some dogs who, I grew up with dogs. I have dogs now. And I kind of hope that I'll always have a dog somewhere. And I want to think that every dog deserves a chance, particularly because we as humans have created them and molded them into the animals they are now. To an extent, they've probably done that to us too, but that's a story for another conversation. Are there some dogs that you think are actually too aggressive, that actually they will always constitute a danger?
I think for some dogs, there is potentially a chance to rehabilitate them. But the reality is there are not people that are able to do it. So I have sometimes in situations where I work at animal shelters, for example, and I do a lot of work with rescue dogs. There are some dogs where it is, in my opinion, kinder to let a dog be put to sleep than kept alive in a small cage for the rest of its life. And some people will have very strong opinions about that and think otherwise. But when there is a dog and it's, like I said, it's never the dog's fault, but it is the reality that they cannot be trusted around people, where they have a long and established bite history, where we know that should this dog get out of the yard, it will likely bite a child because it has in the past. Then for those dogs, it isn't always realistic that they can be out of a shelter. And it's often for many of them, even if it's maybe not a question of it being an incredibly serious, aggressive situation, I do have clients where they have to face the reality that their dog cannot be in public. It has to stay in the yard. And that's the best life that dog is going to have. So you have to be realistic with every dog. It is my first job, I feel, with my human clients and my dog clients is to be honest. And it doesn't mean I'm always right, but I can only be honest from my experience of things if I think something is fixable. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to, certain breeds of dogs or even certain rescue dogs is unless you have experience with the intensity that some dogs can have, people can be very naive when they, from a very good place in their heart, want to adopt a dog, assuming that if they really love the dog a lot, it will be okay. And that is the biggest mistake that happens because it doesn't work like that. You have to go into situations with your eyes wide open if you are going to have a powerful dog with the potential to do something destructive with that power.
You're now in a space where you call yourself a pet custody mediator, and this is about when couples split up, so the humans have stopped talking to each other, what happens to the animals and particularly the dogs. And my sense is that a dog will absolutely know what's going on in a home and will sense the sort of vibe and be affected by that.
Well, they will certainly sense the vibe, but they would have no concept of what's going on. So what dogs will react to is their people reacting in a different and unusual way. And dogs will react to owner's stress either by avoiding that person. So some dogs are really troubled by stressed out people. And some dogs naturally gravitate toward people. They want to help and they want to, bring you a toy to make you feel better. And so it depends on the individual character of the dog to know how they'll react to the stress that the owner is going through, or the owners, let's say. But this is I started talking about opening up a daycare and, that was a crazy idea. And this work now that I do, just for a quick statistic, every 2 minutes in the United States, a new divorce is filed. And more than 60% of those divorces have an animal in the picture. And so the question is, what do you do? Who keeps the dog? What do you do, or who keeps the cat with that situation in such a way that we are, as you alluded to earlier, that we're not humanizing the dogs. We cannot pretend that a dog is a child that should be treated like a child in a divorce situation. That isn't really loving a dog. That's imagining a dog to be something that it's not, probably to fill our own needs, but that isn't loving them. So the work that I do is really based on bringing my experience of animal psychology and dog behavior into the space of divorce mediation so that we are not humanizing, toddlerizing our dogs, which ends up causing them a lot of stress in the long run.
Do you find people fight over their dogs? They have literally a custody battle?
Absolutely. Enormous custody battles. Enormous. The dogs can represent so much in terms of, imagine there's an infidelity, let's say in a marriage, and a betrayal, and then you add a dog onto that picture and, well, you betrayed me, therefore you can't have the dog, or you ruined my life, you can't have the dog too. So the dogs become very symbolic for a lot of people. It becomes a great way to hurt your ex. If let's say your ex is the one who really loves the animal. And we've all heard stories of how the absolute worst of people can come out during a divorce. And so animals are uniquely positioned to unfortunately be used in that sense to weaponize the situation even further, which is also where I come in to try to bring some common sense reality into the situation so that we're being kind to the animal, even though the people are hurting.
Karis Nafte there, someone who's had an entire career making her money out of working with animals.
702. You are listening to The Money Show's Best Bits.
Our shapeshifter this week, Nikki Bush, the expert on human potential and parenting. She's an acclaimed speaker and author. She has spent a long time in this game, talking to people, learning from people, has lots to say about how to make companies work and how to make teams work. She spoke on her journey, what she wanted to do when she was younger, and also how fate intervened.
So, Stephen, I guess my career has evolved as my life has evolved. And I am a really good student of life. I'm a good observer and I'm a good learner, and I can package my learnings. I think that's one of my superpowers, is being able to gather those things and make sense of them. So overall, I'm a sense maker. But whatever I do, and it's evolved from parenting to working in the world of work. So now I do a lot around leadership, women's empowerment. I do team dynamics. It's all the same thing, actually.
Yeah.
It's all about people, connection, relationships, and raising human potential. So kind of the broad umbrella that I operate under now is human potential expert, because that covers all of those things I've just spoken about, and we can still squeeze in the parenting piece.
Yes. I have some questions about that because I find it interesting. I'm often interested, the publications I subscribe to, the columns that I read, that I go and look for, are the columns about work. The Financial Times had a great one for years and years, and then they let Lucy Kellaway go, and that was the end of that. The Economist has one. And yet, you would think, considering how much time we spend at work, often talking and complaining about the same things come up again and again, that actually not much time and attention is given to what the work experience is like in the kind of public conversation.
Yeah, I talk about work-life integration. There's no such thing as work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I've said that for 30 years. Be under no illusion. So it's about how you and how I create our own recipe for work-life integration. And what you do and what I do will be different, because each person is like a unique fingerprint. Each family is like a unique fingerprint. And so there's no real one-size-fits-all. There are some basic principles, but really you've created on the run more than anything else. And so much of work-life integration is about what you're prepared to say yes to and what you're prepared to say no to. So we're really talking boundaries at the end of the day, because what you focus on will flourish. And if you have too many irons in the fire, nothing flourishes. And money flows where focus goes. So I guess, my own parenting experience informed the first part of my career. I wanted to be flexible, so I gave up a corporate career, and I wanted to work for myself, work from home, be there for the firsts of everything with my children, which I was. There were times I felt like I was a racehorse with a bit between my teeth, holding myself back. I was very clear I wasn't going to travel for business till my youngest was 7, because I understand child development. And so as my children got bigger, I had more and more time to work. And that meant I could do more and I could impact more. That's just the way I chose to do it. What it has meant, though, is that I gave up the corporate salary early on in my career, took less home, had more quality time with those I wanted to have quality time with. I'm playing catch up now, financially. I don't regret it. I was asked on the stage the other day, is there a sacrifice you've made in your lifetime, and do you regret it? No, I don't regret it one little bit. And I'm also a great proponent of the fact that no experience is ever wasted, lost, or forgotten. So wherever you are in your life, you've got here based on those experiences, those choices. And so you need to own them. And it's amazing how if you own them, you can pull threads through all the time. And I see that in my own career. The parenting is pulled into leadership. Me becoming a widow at the age of 50, needing to become financially far more savvy than I ever had been, because now it was mine was the only income, has informed my women's empowerment work. So nothing I talk about or have ever spoken about has ever come from a textbook. Even though I speak at business schools, I don't speak like a business school lecturer. Play has always been such a foundational part of the work I did in the parenting, or I do in the parenting field. And I pull that right through into leadership workshops. So, my work is serious, but it has a fun element which makes learning easy for people. And I then provide frameworks and they can put it to good use immediately without going to do an MBA.
For you, women empowerment is one of the things and financial empowerment you've been particularly looking at. And it's clearly informed by your own experience. And there are so many people who've made choices similar to ones that you've made, it's all about childcare, that management, the way our society is, all of those things. I mean, clearly that's what sort of drove you in that direction.
Yeah, so the women's empowerment piece is interesting because I think that for me, I've chosen a catchphrase now, which is choice freedom. Women who control their finances control their future. And you don't have to be putting your whole salary away into investments. But sadly, women mostly keep their money in cash. About 70% of women keep their money in cash rather than investing their money into growth vehicles. So part of my mission is to really inspire women to create better outcomes from their income. And you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, you don't have to be the CEO of a major corporation. But the discipline of the debit order from as early on as possible is going to help you to maximize compound interest. And these are things that women on the whole have been kind of kept out of for a long time until literally when FICA came in. That changed everything for women because suddenly you needed to have an account in your name, a bank account in your name.
I never thought of it like that, I have to say.
It's quite an interesting one. And it's given me a bit of self-forgiveness for the financial mistakes that I've made because FICA was only in the 90s when it came in. I'd already been working for a few years by then. But for women, it's about also not being ignorant. There's a lot of information out there today.
Is there another thing, which is that men have no problem investing for themselves and their own future, but women actually think, well, the money's better spent on so often someone other than them? Well, that's where I was heading, but yes.
Yes, absolutely. So we have generations of conditioning to be selfless. It's in our DNA. And for so often we've been the supporting cast. And you can step into the spotlight of your own life, even if you're in a marriage. It's obviously a shared situation. But when I say stepping into the spotlight of your own life, it's having money of your own. It's paying your future self, because one day you're going to want to make some choices. Do you want to step out of corporate? Do you want to set up your own job? Do you want to retire? Do you want to divorce? Whatever it is, for me, choice freedom is when a woman has the ability to make the decisions and the choices she either needs or wants to make when it matters.
I mean, and you look at the correlation sort of through history of when financial freedom for women came and when divorce rates started to go up, and you can see how important that financial choice is. When I look at people who are speaking on a stage doing what you're doing professionally, almost none of them started at sort of 17 thinking, I want to be a speaker, because you have to have a story first, whatever it is. You can be Rian Manser and, I don't know, go around the world or something, or row across the Pacific in a bucket. And suddenly, sorry, Rian, but you know what I mean. And there's the story. What did you want to do when you were growing up, when you were finishing school? I mean, did you have an idea? And clearly you did some corporate stuff. Is there a BCom you've never told us about, Nikki Bush?
No, it's quite interesting because the aptitude test that I did in matric said I should become a dietitian or a home economist. And I'm sure I would have been very good at it.
A home economist. Yeah. This is a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, home economics was my best subject. I mean, I loved it. Then I went to Australia as an exchange student for a year. And I believe that mentors come into your life officially and unofficially all the time. And we need to be awake to the mirrors that appear in our lives. And somebody appeared in my life. It was a Rotarian in Australia who was in marketing in the non-profit space. And I did some work experience in a place for cerebral palsy children. And while I was there, he put a sheaf of papers in my bag one afternoon when I left. And on the top it said, I think you would be great at this. And it was from the Institute of Public Relations in Australia. and it defined what a job in public relations looked like. So I came home and qualified, did a 3-year qualification in public relations. So I started off my career, and most people don't know that I've had 3 careers.
Yeah.
Which I think is what makes me an interesting speaker and an interesting business consultant and strategic leadership coach, because I've got lots of dimensions and different experiences. So, I was in public relations for 10 years, eventually ran my own shop for a couple of years once I realized I wanted to be self-employed. Then I fell into my passion because another mentor appeared and pulled me off into a direct selling meeting for the direct sales of games and toys. Smile Education, some of our listeners will remember them, biggest manufacturer and network marketing company of educational games and toys. And that spawned an entirely different career of leadership, recruiting, running teams. I was great at sales. I could write up training material. People came from all over the place to come to my trainings. And I loved it. And a lot of what I did in those years gave me such an appreciation for human behavior, how people make decisions, how you can motivate people. And I've repackaged that, and I do it in the corporate space for top CEOs. Because human nature is human nature.
Yeah.
And I understand the attention game and, how to motivate people and how to see them. That's the real issue.
Yeah.
So third career was kind of sales related. And then, second career. Third career was Nikki Bush, the speaker, and author, which started off with me in 2006 as the parenting expert.
So I wanted to ask you a question about a parenting expert, and I realize it's not your main focus now. But, and I always laugh to myself whenever my 13-year-old daughter comes home with a joint project. I remember I don't know who you were talking to on the radio, saying, apart from screens, it's the parents' worst nightmare, the group project. I just laughed and laughed. But when you are talking about parenting with people, you are getting really under their skin. Now you really know them in a way that you don't. And I'm always amazed as a parent. I will talk about my kids in a way to someone I don't know, so long as they're also a parent, because there's the secret kind of sisterhood and brotherhood of parents, And you'll tell them things and they'll tell you things. And you find that's really interesting. It must have been quite a thing to get under people's skin like that, because you really know their hopes and their fears when you talk to them about their children.
It's very personal. And we have to stop living vicariously through our children. And yes, we are shaping our children without a doubt. But our children actually, ultimately, we need to let go of them. Your kids are too young for you to understand this, but I'm pulling your leg. But really, this is the parallel between leadership in a business and leadership as a parent. Is the ultimate goal of both is to raise up resourceful, resilient, independent children or people, employees, and let them go. And that's the most frightening thing for a parent, to even consider that one day their children, they must launch them into the world, because you can't kind of conceive of it when they're really small. You're getting to that point where you might be able to see that your teenagers might one day go and spread their wings. But if we don't actually focus on this, we will have children living with us till they're 35. And so I guess I'm good at painting the reality of, do you want this? They will steal your retirement, which is true, and it's happening all over the place, because kids don't want to take whatever's out there. They want something specific. And it's the same with the business. Whether it's your own business and you're the founder, or whether you're the CEO of a multinational, you need to literally become redundant. If you're a good leader, you're raising other people up behind you, underneath you, beside you, to take over your job. And that's your role, beyond creating a profitable enterprise and keeping it profitable. But if you just think about that, it changes the lens through which you are looking in terms of making your parenting decisions or making your leadership decisions.
Nikki, there are a lot of people who sort of do what you do. They speak about different things. COVID must have been the most awful time. And I sometimes wonder if, in fact, that entire market has yet come back.
COVID was a brilliant time for me. on the back of the loss of my husband, I was pretty much 2 years into the grieving journey when COVID hit. And I knew instinctively that every person on this planet was going to go through a version of what I had been through for 2 years. There was a moment when COVID first hit, and I just started feeling a tiny bit of a sense of control in my life again after my husband's death. And I remember looking up at the sky and going, dear God, can you just give me a break?
Yeah.
Now you must give us COVID. But the interesting thing was that because my being knew what everyone was going to go through, my empathy for everybody was, how can I help? And I wrote a white paper on how to mitigate the biggest risk to your business right now, which is parents working from home with their children.
Yes.
And so this became the bridge between parenting and the world of work for me, and getting a real foothold into working in the corporate space. And it went viral, that white paper. And I sent it to my publisher, Penguin Random House, and I said, look, this has gone viral. Don't know if it's of interest to you. It could be a book or something. And they came back to me and said, yes, but we don't want it just to be about parents in the workforce and working from home with children. Can you write something bigger? And so from writing Future-Proof Your Child for the 2020s and beyond, I then wrote Future-Proof Yourself, How to Win at Work and Life, which incorporated all the disruptions that are happening in the future world of work, as well as working in hybrid, et cetera, working from home with kids. And that book has become a bestseller.
Nikki Bush there, our shapeshifter this week, someone who's had a fascinating career as a speaker and an author.
The best of the Money Show
on 702.
702.
That's the best bits of the Money Show this week, just a digest of some of the most important conversations. If you'd like to hear more, please go to our website or your podcast app and search for The Money Show. Really appreciate the fact that you've been with us. We're back with you on Monday from 6 o'clock. Have a good weekend.